Hey, what is going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Hart for those of you that are new, and today I'll be breaking down the Showdown Slate here for the Thursday night football game tonight. We have between the 49ers and the Rams. A lot to go over, a lot of injury news on the 49ers side. I'll be breaking down the slate for you guys if you're building a lineup for tonight of who we should target, why, all the good stuff. So there'll be cores, values, all the good stuff in this breakdown. So make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. Let's get right into it. You guys are playing week 5, the Sunday main slate for DraftKings. Check out my early look video, which is already out. And on Saturday, I'll be dropping my kind of final core play video look. So as we can see here right now, in terms of the spread, 8.5 point spread. So obviously there's a blowout risk for tonight, 44.5 game total. And then in terms of anytime touchdown score, Kyren Williams, his touchdown percentage, or excuse me, the odds there have dropped. When I was recording this video earlier, it was like minus 205, 210. And CMC's has dropped as well. So it seems like the money's kind of shifting around there. But yeah, as you can see from the spread, there's definitely some blowout risk for tonight. And we'll get over to the 49ers side, kind of go over the news there. So for the 49ers, obviously, in general, they're extremely, extremely banged up. A lot of injury news. Their offensive line has been terrible. Defense is banged up. But for tonight, obviously, there's no Brock Purdy. So it'll be Mac Jones once again, who's obviously been very viable. But obviously, going against that Rams defense, don't love that spot. Ricky Pearsall, wide receiver 1, is out. And then wide receiver 2, Juwan Jennings, is out. So what does that mean for the 49ers side? I expect take a quick look at the depth chart here. I expect, Juwan Jennings, excuse me, Kendrick Bourne to be wide receiver 1 for them, Demarcus Robinson to be wide receiver 2, and then wide receiver 3/4 will be Sky Moore and MVS. We'll take a quick look here at the kind of the routes from last week. Keep in mind, Ricky Pearsall did get hurt, did injure his knee, and only played, I think, like 15 snaps in that second half there. So obviously, everything's gonna be going through CMC, but in terms of the passing game besides him, like who should we look to? Kendrick Bourne's gonna be that wide receiver 1, as I mentioned, playing alongside Ricky Pearsall, Juwan Jennings. He saw 27 routes, 4 targets. So I think it's clear and easy to say he'll be that wide receiver 1. In terms of wide receiver 2, it's probably gonna be Demarcus Robinson. Only ran 12 routes, got 2 targets, but he did come back from, if we take a quick look here, he was suspended the first 3 weeks of the season, so I wasn't able to play. Came back. He played, I think it was about 35% of the snaps there in week 4. Obviously, as wide receiver 4, he wasn't very involved, but now that Juwan Jennings, Ricky Pearsall are out, he'll be heavily involved as wide receiver 2. And then, as I mentioned, wide receiver 3/4 will be MVS and Sky Moore. MVS didn't see any routes there that last week, but Sky Moore did, saw 4, only got 1 target there. So it'll be kind of a toss up. If you want to get to them, it'll be kind of gross. I don't think there's a need to get to them on the slates, but they are there. But yeah, starting with the side at the top here for the 49ers, CMC, it really comes down to game script. If they get blown out, I think there could be a shot that you take it, or there could be that possibility if you fade him. I don't love it. It seems he's gonna be heavily involved in the passing game there. You just love to see more efficiency in terms of the running game, but that's not on him. They just can't block. Hasn't seen any rushing touchdowns yet. So I obviously expect that to change. We'll see. It doesn't look great right now in terms of that offense. So I think he makes for a great, obviously, captain. Really strong flex play. I mean, it's CMC, nothing much else to say about him. In terms of Mac Jones, it just really comes down to how do you think this game script's going to go? Like, do you think they're going to be viable? Do you think they'll be able to, put a efficient offense together to be able to score against the Rams? Really good and strong defense. I don't know. I don't love it, but if you think he is able to, I think he makes for a viable captain just because of how cheap wide receivers, one Kendrick Bourne is and Jake Tungus, and then CMC. Like, it's very easy to stack him with those 3 guys and bring it back with Puka on a slate where there's a ton of value. So I think it's a fine play. I just think in terms of me only building 1 or 2 lineups, I think I might fade him. Just because of the game script I'm building my lineup around, which I think is more so going to be ground and pound in the Rams defense. Eddie Pinheiro, he's always viable, as I always mentioned with kickers. Like, it always seems like 1 or 2 of them, end up in a showdown slate, especially like a gross game script like tonight where the 49ers offense is heavily banged up. Like, they could rely heavily on a guy like Eddie Pinheiro once they get into like the field goal range. As I mentioned, Kendrick Bourne will be that wide receiver 1. Really good value play there at 4.6. Going to be heavily involved. Same thing with Jake Tungus. Heavily involved as you saw from last week. Week 4, 26 routes, 5 targets. He got a red zone screen as well. So it looks like they're going to be getting him the ball. I really like him at that price tag. Moving on down a little bit more here for the 49ers. Don't love the 49ers defense. And as I mentioned, Demarcus Robinson will be that wide receiver too. Should be involved. He's a good talent, good red zone threat, as we saw last year from the Rams. So him and Kendrick Bourne look like really, really strong plays. If you're looking for some cheap wide receiver 1 and 2s for the slate, to kind of build your lineup around. As I mentioned, MVS, Sky Moore will split that wide receiver 3/4 role. I don't love it. I don't think he's really need to take a shot on them just because of how cheap Tungus and Kendrick Bourne and Demarcus Robinson are. Like, there's really no need to get down to these kind of gross wide receivers in MVS and Sky Moore. But if you're making 150 lineups, I'd say definitely include them in a few. The only guy I do have interest in below that, Demarcus Robinson price range is Kyle Juszczyk 2000. Ran 11 routes as we saw from last week. As we've seen from, the previous seasons, once they do have some injuries in the wide receiver room, Kyle Juszczyk will be one of those guys that look to out of the backfield to block more, just to be a little bit more involved. In terms of routes run, I expect anything from like 5 to maybe 15 max. Nothing crazy there. Maybe 3, 4 targets at max. But it definitely makes him viable, especially in the red zone. Like, he's one of those gadget guys. He could be utilized. So I think it'd be my favorite kind of value dart throw play on the 49ers side. In terms of the Rams, as I said, really game script dependent. Like, if you're gonna go more so that rushing attack, Rams defense, I think it could be viable. Don't hate me. I think it could be viable to fade Puka. I don't love it because he is one of my he's my wide receiver 1 on my fantasy team. So I'd love for him to go for 25, 30 plus again. It's just one of those things, right? Like, how often do we see a wide receiver be able to put up those stats consistently? Like, there's gonna be one of those games where he goes for 5 for 50, 470, something like that. Which, if that happens, it could be viable to fade him. Not saying you should do it. Not saying I love that, but there is that possibility, especially in a gross game like tonight, where the 49ers are just very, very bad right now in terms of their injuries and that wide receiver situation. So maybe the offense just can't put anything together, and maybe they don't need to heavily rely on Puka, and they can just rely more so on Kyron Williams, who's going to be my favorite captain play there. Where is he? Right there, 13.5K. They did say that they're going to kind of ease his workload down a little bit more, bring it down to about like a 65-35 split with Blake Corum. But I expect him in this game script to see 15 rushing attempts and maybe a couple targets out of the backfield. So really, really, it comes down to just game script. What do you think the game script is going to be tonight? I'm going to go more so that rushing and defense side of things for the Rams, and possibly fade one of the top 2 wide receivers for them, or maybe even Stafford, and kind of go that value route for the 49ers. So we'll take a look there, but obviously Puka looks amazing. We know what we're going to get from him. Stafford looks really strong. Could be a viable captain play. I think I prefer him in the flex just because he does have somewhat of a limited upside. Obviously, no rushing upside. And in terms of like the touchdowns, it's kind of flip flop where last year Kyron Williams was getting a lot of the red zone touchdowns. Matthew Stafford, it seemed like every game he's floating between 14 to 18 fantasy points. Never really got above 2 touchdowns or 300 passing yards. It's kind of scripted a little bit here, but still, as you can see, doesn't have massive upside, so that kind of makes me scared to get to him as like a captain play. But if it's a gross game, like, it could be viable. I think I prefer him in the flex though. Would rather get to like a guy like Puka, obviously, as a captain, or a guy like Devontae Adams. Super, super efficient. He's seen a ton of, not seen too much crazy, targets, but he's seen like 1 to 2 deep shots a game from Stafford. And then once they get in the red zone, he's kind of been their favorite option to throw to. So if you do end up like fading Puka, it could make sense to get to Stafford and Adams there. Obviously, as I said, don't love fading Puka, but it could be a possibility depending on the lineup you want to build and the game script you're going with. But yeah, obviously all 3 look fantastic. I think my favorite one right now is going to be Devontae, but we'll see as the day goes on. As mentioned, kickers are always viable, especially in a gross slate like this. Rams defense, I really, really like. I expect them to be pretty popular. Going against Mac Jones, who's turnover prone. The offense is just banged up. So it looks like a pretty solid matchup here for the Rams with a really, really strong defense, especially that defense line is really, really good. So 4,000 for them is very cheap. We've seen in kind of years past, showdowns past, that a lot of times when we get a matchup like this, the defenses are always really priced up and they're still very, highly owned. And this defense is very cheap. So I expect them to get a good amount of interest, but for good reason, especially if you're going with Kyron at captain. I think it makes sense to run it with the Rams defense and kind of go that game script route. In terms of wide receiver 3, it is Jordan Winnington. He ran 30 routes, got 1 target there. And as you can see here, Tutu only ran 17, got 2 targets. So I don't really know why they priced him Tutu $2,000 more expensive than Jordan Whittington. Doesn't really make sense. I don't think there's a need to get to either one of them. But if you're making 150, sure, you can throw him in a few. As I mentioned, Blake Corum will split that backfield with Kyron Williams. Going to see about 35% of the snaps. As you can see, he's getting a decent amount of work in terms of backup. But I think he's viable, especially if you go more so that blowout risk or that blowout script. He could be viable at 3,000. And then in terms of tight ends, Higbee is doubtful. So I expect it to be the Colby Parkinson and Davis Allen. As you can see here, Kobe ran 7, and then Davis Allen ran 5 in that last game there for the Rams. Don't expect heavy usage from them, but once they get in the red zone, like a guy like Davis Allen, as we saw from weeks 1 and 2, he could get that red zone catch, and he could, if he puts up 8, 9 fancy points, it could, he could make his way into the flex spot there. So they are definitely viable. As dart throw plays, I think I'd rather take a shot on not going down to the cheap value, the cheap values. I don't think there's really a need, just because of how cheap the 49ers are. Yeah, that's kind of it for the breakdown. Like, it's just kind of, it's gross. I wouldn't say play a lot just because of the uncertainty of the Rams side. Um, we just don't know a clear picture besides CMC. Like, will they get Kendrick Bourne, wide receiver 1, heavily involved? Will it be Demarcus Robinson? Will it be Jake Tungus? Like, we don't really know. All we know is CMC in the Rams side. So it'll be an interesting game tonight. I'm going to play light. Probably only go with one lineup. Going to go more so that run heavy game script with the Rams defense. Bring it back with Tungus and CMC. And then in terms of the flex, probably get to like either Puka or Stafford or maybe Devontae there. So hope you guys liked the video, the quick breakdown. Once again, I'll have my core play video for Saturday coming out for the Sunday main slate, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.